Today's episode is going to be very interesting. So, when I talk about wealth being counterintuitive to human nature, I really mean that. And so, oftentimes people come to me and they ask, man, how do you get ahead? How do you pay off your debt? How do you invest? How do you get wealthy? And, we talk about all the stuff, and, myself included, talking about how do you invest in a Roth IRA? How do you budget? How do you have proper estate planning done? How do you have your insurances in place? All the kind of like the technical jargon of the financial industry. But what I often don't talk about are the reasons that humans struggle with finance. And oftentimes it's not because of all the technical stuff, it's all because of the emotional behavior stuff. And so when I was thinking about how to build a solution for the average person out there, the middle class individual that wants to become great with their finances, but how do they become great with their finances? They have to overcome the emotional behavioral aspect of it. In today's episode, I want to break down 5 specific reasons that people are struggling with money. And all of them are very normal things that revolve around human nature. And so when somebody comes into my Budget Dog Academy and they work with our team one-on-one and they work through a lifetime of success with us internally, because it's a lifetime program, those individuals, the very first thing they do is they meet with a behavioral psychologist, Heather. And Heather will walk through, and I've had episodes with Heather, on my podcast before, so you guys can listen to those as well. But Heather will walk through emotional and behavioral psychology with that individual, oftentimes programmed at the subconscious level that we don't see on a conscious level every single day. But when you overcome, more so when you become aware of those things, you start to act differently, you start to do things differently, you start to set yourself up for success. And so what I want to do today is show the 5 main things that people are getting crushed by. That's just very normal stuff, human nature stuff, type of things. And if you overcome these things, you will be wildly successful. And this doesn't just relate to money. This relates to a lot of things in life, and you'll understand the parallels as we talk about this. And it's pretty intriguing when you break down each one of these bullet points as to how these are going to impact you, not from a financial level, but from an overall level. And so the first one I want to talk about today is the natural inclination to avoid pain. As humans, we don't put our finger on the stove and sit there and say, this feels great. We say, ow, that hurt. I'm going to take my finger off the stove because that really stunk. That really hurt. That really burnt my finger. Like, I don't ever want to do that again. So I learned my lesson and I want to avoid that pain at all costs. And so every single time I go around the stove, I'm extra cautious. I start to think about it. I start to turn the stove knob, but then I make sure everything's off the stove. I'm much more hyper aware of that stove once I burnt myself because I want to avoid pain. And that's okay. That's a good thing. It's how we survive in a sense, which I'll get to in a second. But avoiding pain is not a bad thing. It's just natural. It's human nature. But how does that negatively or adversely impact our finances in a big, big way? And so what happens is, in order to actually build real wealth, you have to sustain pain. You have to be able to put your hand on the stove a little bit, maybe not forever, but for a little bit. And you have to feel the pain, embrace the pain, and keep the pain for a while. And that sucks. And that's why people suck at building wealth. They want to do, I want to take my finger off the stove. I want to feel better. Naturally, I agree. I would love to do the same. I want to keep my hand on the stove. But it holds you back in so many ways. And let me explain. When my wife and I were paying off $304,000 of debt, we didn't like that time. That wasn't a fun time. Like, there was a lot of sacrifice that went into that. We paid it off in 5 years. That was our mortgage included and everything. And so when we paid that off, like, at the time we were in such like, we got to get it done mode that we kind of forgot about our feelings during that time. But if you asked either one of us right this second, hey, would you go back to that time? We would unequivocally say no, like absolutely no. And neither one of us would go back. But that's the requirement it takes to pay off the debt fast. Like, that's the pain you have to go through to pay off your debt. Maybe on the reverse end, in order to build wealth, you have to sustain long-term pains or long-term trends of volatility and risk in the market. And so as we built our wealth, and just paying off debt's not building wealth, by the way. So when we paid off our debt, that was one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle was building the wealth. And as you guys saw me post on social media recently, over the last 12 months, I think we earned $407,000 in the market. Like, literally insane to even think about, even say out loud. That was a dream. That's a dream. And it really is playing out real time. And it's amazing to see, but it's really just because of the time we put in the last 11 years. And I know all my students are getting there. All of my Budget Dog Academy students are moving at a faster pace than me simply because they're doing the exact roadmap that I already learned the hard way of doing. And so they're just going at it at a faster rate, which is awesome to see. And as I mentioned, if you want to book a call with my team, go to the show notes below and book a call with my team right now, because it is going to change your life in drastic ways that I can't even explain. You'll understand as we can kind of talk more about through this podcast episode. And so the $407,000 we made over the last 12 months is all fun and, games, right? It's all rainbows, all that kind of stuff. But what people don't see is the $60,000 loss we had in one of the months. And so most times when people are building wealth, they emotionally react to a bad month. And no matter what education they have, how much logic they have, they are emotional. They want to avoid that pain. And so they continue to build all this wealth. And all of a sudden they see this downtrend and they're like, wow, we just lost $60,000 in a month. We got to change something. This isn't right. Versus understanding that's part of the process. And so in 2022, we invested the most money we've ever invested in the market up to that date, year to date. In 2022, as you guys know, was a pretty bad year in the market. We lost about 20% in the market for the full entire year. It wasn't a great year, but we invested as much as humanly possible, and it paid off literally dividends to this day. But a lot of people during the time are like, you need to sell, you need to do this. The end of the times are coming, the end of the world's coming. And we sustained the pain. We were able to handle the pain and endure the pain. And so with each one of these setbacks or holdback or whatever you want to call it, human nature tendencies that we have, I want to tell you how to solve for these. Like avoiding pain, like I said, is how we've survived our entire life. For thousands and thousands of years. It's not a bad thing. But I want you to shift your paradigm when you think about avoiding pain. Ask yourself this question. How many great things, let's think about great sports accomplishments, Michael Jordan winning all the championships, Rome being built how it was built. Were any of those things built without pain? Were any of those things built, or was anything great out there? Any Steve Jobs building Apple? Were any of those companies, sports accomplishments, political achievements, did anything not require pain? Ask yourself that. And once you realize and sink that in, that it's an expectation, that's part of the process, that's going to happen, you'll start to endure and embrace the pain. You want it to suck because that's growing pains. That's part of the process. And the more you endure the pain, the longer you endure the pain, the bigger the accomplishment, the further you get away from the average population out there. It will change your life in a meaningful way. That's number one, avoiding pain. Number two is survival. As humans, we've been surviving for thousands of years. And so that's again, none of this stuff that I'm going to talk about today is bad inherently. It's part of the human psyche. It's part of the human makeup and chemical makeup. And that's okay. But we need to learn how to embrace and adopt and adapt, in a sense, to all of these things. So if we're in survival mode, we're thinking short-term pleasures right here, right now, we're never going to have real accomplishments in life. And so we need the patience to build real wealth. Like that's a requirement. I have an urge to have it all now. So do you. Like I want to pay off all my debt today. I want to become a millionaire today. I want to become financially free today. And if I operate out of that mindset of today, I want to have a six-pack today. None of the stuff we just talked about is ever going to get accomplished. Because if I act out of my selfish interest of how I feel emotionally today, there's never going to be a long-term game plan. Nothing of significance is ever going to be accomplished. And I'm going to always be in the same situation, always chasing. Why do you think people consistently would chase the get-rich-quick trend? Like whether it be crypto, whether it be the marijuana business, back in the day, whether it be AI right now, like all of those things are get rich quick type of things. And by the way, crypto, AI, and in the marijuana business, by no means are those not going to survive or make a massive impact on society. But my point is like chasing the trend of the time. And like a lot of those things will fail in different capacities. And just, we've seen like the .com era is a good example. So like .com era, yeah, sure. It created what we're doing right now on the screen or on, through Spotify or wherever you're listening. But at the same time, there was a lot of failures from that era, right? And a lot of people chased the get rich quick, shiny object that never amounted to anything. And it happens with every single trend. AI is going to happen as well. While AI is going to be great, you get my point, okay? So we're constantly chasing, and having these short-term urges. If I go to the gym and I want to do a million deadlifts because I'm like, well, today I'll build the back I'm trying to build, or I'll build the six pack I'm trying to build. But I do deadlifts that day and to a crazy amount, and I make myself extremely sore, and I never go back to the gym. So there's no consistency to it. I'll never be in shape. I'll never get the six pack. But if I slowly build my tolerance up and really push myself in every single day, slow and steadily, and build up a foundation in a six pack, it eventually will come. But it doesn't. You need patience for that to happen. And so I was teaching a first grade class when I was at Deloitte, and we did a junior achievement in a day, J in a day it's called. And I went to a first grade class in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was talking about the whole lesson of the day was, what is the difference, guys, between needs and wants? And those first graders really understood the difference between needs and wants. As much as you think a first grader's emotional and like they're going to react emotionally, there was a great lesson to be learned that day. And they really did take away a lot from that. That night, I went to hang out with my friends, and they're all obviously in their 20s. And what was crazy about that is I was listening to the conversations, and I wasn't judging. I had a non-judgmental tone, but I was listening to the conversations. And there were so many people that were telling me they need something. They need the house. They need the car. They need the chain, whatever the case is. And they kept saying they need, and I kept asking them, do you guys really need that? Like, is it really food, water and shelter? And they're like, oh, whatever, man. Like, but what I realized in that moment was that human or adults still have their inner child. They have that inner child that listens to the media and they're listening to the radio, they're watching social media, they're scrolling through their phone, they're watching TV, and they get hit with a commercial. And all of those messages are being programmed into us to say we need things. I need to be pretty. The girls with the pink tax they always talk about. I need to be pretty, so therefore I need this makeup, or I need those heels, or those clothes, or a guy. I need to be a guy, or I need to be a man, and then they'll say, well, in order to be a man, the commercial will imply that you need this car, or these clothes, or this suit, and the male and the female will hear that message over and over and over, and they'll constantly go back to, I want to be a man, I want to be a female, a pretty female, or a masculine man, or whatever the case is, whatever message they're trying to construe in your mind. And as a result, we'll go buy those things, and we'll have an emotional need to getting those things, not an actual need, an emotional need that's been created into our mind. And oftentimes this holds us back in a massive way. So how do you solve for this? I want you to ask yourself, what would happen if you don't get that? If you don't get the new shoes, if you don't get the new suit, and you're just how you are right now, what would happen? I challenge you to ask yourself that question and not let emotion overplay the logical answer. Because the logical answer is saying, probably nothing. Probably will be the same. Probably all be all exactly the same. Your emotional brain's going to take over. I will warn you that when you ask that question, you go, well, if I don't, I won't get the job. I won't do this. I won't impress somebody. Stop yourself right there and ask yourself, what will actually happen to you? That will change your life in a meaningful way. The third piece of human nature that holds us back, because wealth is counterintuitive to human nature, like I mentioned, the emotional needs that people have. And again, emotions with people are a good thing. If none of us felt emotion, we'd all be robots, and it would be a horrific life. We would live in an awful society. I'm glad we have emotion. But when it comes to wealth building, we need a lot of logic. And so I had a student reach out to me in tears, like literally blown, like I could tell the second I picked up the phone, I was like, this isn't going to be good. I don't know what happened. Like, I hope everything's okay. And it was all over a tire being blown on the car. And this isn't a student that was trying to get out of a lot of debt, struggle with debt payoff. And so therefore this wasn't a big deal. Like, hey, I'm trying to pay off all this debt. I feel like this is a setback. And here's the reality. You're going to have to endure pain, like I talked about. It's not always great. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are going to be tough things that happen. Your ability to build resistance to challenge in things that come your way is going to make or break you. I felt for this student. I had the emotion back. I had the empathy towards the student. It sucked. It was horrible. But I asked her, I won't say her name. I said, listen, I'll call her Amanda for the sake of this podcast. I'll say, Amanda, what happens now that your tire blew? Like, you're spending time sulking and being upset about your tire being blown. I understand where you're coming from. I hate this for you. But what happens if you continue to become emotional towards this? And during that phone call, before I even said that question, she told me she needed a new car. And I was like, hold on. So you're telling me you need a brand new car. What's that going to cost? She's like $40,000. I go, you're going to opt for a $40,000 new car because $40,000 new car because your tire blew that could cost a couple $100. She's like, you're right. You're right. You're right. I'm like, bring the emotion out for a second and just like, let's talk about this. Let's think about this logically. If you need a $40,000 new car, that's going to set you back so much further than just getting a new tire on the car. That the car is perfectly fine. And she, at that moment, realized how emotional she was being and how not logical she was being. And this happens all the time, guys. You could have a financial setback. That's going to happen. When we were paying off debt, lots of things happened to us along the way. We had $200,000 in medical bills for my daughter in 2022. Lots of setbacks are going to happen. How do you handle that? What's the resistance level that you're able to have when the bar is on your chest? What type of tension can you hold in your chest for how long? That's the difference between somebody that's really successful and somebody that's not, truly. And so you're going to have emotion in your situation, but how do you provide logic to overcome that emotion? There will be job loss. There will be recessions. There will be setbacks. How do you do that? And so for the solve for this one, I want you to create an automatic financial roadmap. I want you to automate everything. I want you to have an automated system. If you need help, again, that's what we do in Budget Dog Academy, but you need to create an automatic financial roadmap. If you think that you don't, you're going to continue to be emotional and react. If you're not automating this whole entire, honestly, automating bills, investments, debt pay down, if you're not automating every last component, there will be emotional decision-making that happens in your situation. And the person that has the logical, automatic financial roadmap set in stone, already set up, will beat you without question, 10 out of 10 times. It's on you to build that. And again, we can help you if you need that, but you need to build the automatic financial roadmap. If you want to apply with my team, again, on a call, go in the show notes below and do that right now. The next piece of the puzzle is groupthink. And so oftentimes we all know we're very, very guilty of groupthink. There was a study, I think it was called the Ash experiment, where one person came in and they saw 3 lines. And don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's called the Ash experiment. And there was 3 lines. The second one was clearly the biggest line, the tallest line. And the person came in and said the second is definitely the biggest, like without question. And first and third were definitely shorter. And so then, as part of the experiment, another group of people came in and they all said, with the person listening, which is the longest line? Everyone said, oh, number 3 is definitely, remember, number 2 was clearly the longest line. And so all of the people that came in said number 3 was the largest. And so that person that just said second was largest started rethinking. He's like, whoa, hold on. Why is everyone saying the third's like, clearly, isn't the second the largest? So then they asked that individual again, which one of the 3 lines is the longest? And again, it's clear as day. Number 2 was clearly the longest. That person selected most of the time number 3 because all of those individuals said 3. And they were, obviously people that were told to say 3. They weren't actually thinking 3. They were just like, it was an experiment. And that individual changed their answer from 2 to 3 because everybody said it. And this happens all the time. And if you continue to think like the group does, you're going to get the result the group gets. And I don't know about you guys, but last time I checked the results of the average person in America, the results weren't great. 78% lived paycheck to paycheck. Most people can't afford a $400 emergency. Stats don't show favorable outcomes. And so if you think like the group, you're going to get the results of the group. You need a lot of individual thinking, not to mention, I don't know how many times people come to me and say, which investment should I select? I go, dude, I don't know. Like, I don't know your situation. This is why I meet with people in the academy to walk you through the process and education steps to get to the answer that you need to get to. And you'll get to the answer within the academy without question. But if you keep moving and asking the same questions everyone else asks, you're going to get the same result. And your situation is different. You need individual thinking. You need to apply all of the education and information out there to your situation. If you ask, what's the group think about which investment should we pick? Everyone goes to pick that investment. It's not going to be the good investment. That's going to be what the average person thinks, and the average results are the average results. Do not be like that. How do you solve for this? Number 1, We want to study the data. We want to learn and use the education that we have at our disposal. We want to block out external thinking. We want to block out the media telling us what to do, the radio show telling us what to do, the commercials telling us what to do. We want to think for ourselves. Then we want to work with a professional to have a second opinion, similar to when you go to the doctor. You go to the doctor, they say some bad news. Well, I want a second opinion. So I want you to think first, independently, individually, of what your situation should look like and why it should look like that, based on the education that you provided yourself. This is why education is so important. If you don't know, you're not going to know what to do. You're just guess, right? And then you're going to rely on other people. If you educate yourself and you get really fully educated, like all my students are, you're going to be a lot more confident to think for yourself, individual thinking, and you're not going to group think. On my post, when I post something about some index fund or ETF, everyone thinks that's like the answer. I'm like, that's not the answer. That's an example. And so the difference there is substantial, absolutely substantial. I also want you to do some science experiments, actually looking at backwards at real situations that occurred. I can tell you right now, I'll give you an example. In 2019, 2020, ARKK, the ETF ran by Cathie Wood, was the talk of the town. And thematic ETFs, from data that I studied and education that I know, and experiences that I'm talking about in the past, 95% of those lost to the S&P 500. Knowing all of that, I sat there and looked at this. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a colossal failure. And as the stakes rode higher and more people invest in the average population got in, I was very well on record, very much so on record many times. You all are going to lose everything. And what happened? Whew, straight down, like it was horrendous looking. And everyone sold out of their ARK position, and no one talks about ARK anymore. And the Wealth Dad and I, Sean, we always joke about this, is we all warned you guys based on common sense, data, education, actual real life experiences in the past. 95% of these guys lost the ETF. Why would this ETF beat the S&P going forward? And for a short time, it did. Of course, they all do. But over a 20-year period, will they? Over a 30-year period, will they? And we were right. And so I want you to really start to educate yourself and really look backwards at real life situations that, hindsight's 2020. They say that for a reason. You can actually go see what's happened when people think all alike, groupthink. It's a very dangerous thing to do, and not just money, everything. The next thing is good social standing. Because we were all very tribal, as for thousands of years, we had this sense, innate sense in ourselves to be part of a group and to have a good social standing. And so naturally, we want to get the group to approve us, and we want the people in the group to accept us. And so oftentimes what happens as a result is we buy stupid shit. We do stupid things, emotional decision making, because the group needs to accept us. The group needs to feel like, we got to be wanted by the group, because that's a very emotional, deep embedded need in us, because the social standing of literally tribes, that's how you lived. And so going back to the initial, part of survival that we talked about, and avoiding that pain that you have to endure in order not to fit in, and the emotions, all of this stuff is kind of in groupthink. All this stuff is coming into this fifth bullet point, which is good social standing. So we might be insecure, so we go buy the latest, greatest thing. Or we might feel like, I hear realtors say this a lot. Shout out to my realtors. Oh, well, my clients won't think as much about me if I drive up in a Toyota versus a Mercedes. So therefore, I'll buy a really nice Mercedes. In that realtor life, man, you guys really want the good social standing. And you're like, well, it makes my business better. It's like, no, selling it, being good at your job makes your business better, not what you wear and what you drive. And I always joke about this growing up. One, nobody cares what you actually like. No, everyone's so selfish and thinking about themselves for the most part. Nobody cares what you drive. They don't really think about it, to be honest. So don't be that egotistical. But my first car was a 2003 stick shift, black Cavalier. And I waxed that thing every single week. And I loved it. I thought it was awesome. It was an awesome car. I was 16. It was $1,800 car. And I waxed it every single week. It was beautiful. And it was one of the nicer cars at the time. I think it was 2006, so 2003 wasn't too old of a car at the time. And it wasn't the fanciest cars, but it was really, really nice and well taken care of. When you got in, it looked great, smelled great, it looked great. Then, as I got older, hand-me-downs happened in the family, and that went to my brother, and the waxing stopped, the cleaning stopped. A 16-year-old kind of got in the car, a real 16-year-old outside of myself, and the care went down a level. And while my car wasn't the most expensive, it was well respected. People understood that I took care of my stuff. I presented myself well. Just because it wasn't expensive doesn't mean it wasn't a nice car. And so just because you don't spend a bunch of money on a car doesn't mean you can't present yourself well. Just because you don't buy the fanciest clothes doesn't mean you can't present yourself well. Most of my clothes are 10 years old. And most people would say I present myself very well from a physical appearance standpoint. I don't buy a bunch of fancy stuff. I just take care of my body, eat well, and don't look like crap. And so when you're looking into being approved by a group, oftentimes people will just buy stuff to compensate for their lack thereof. When my brother got that car, all of a sudden the top of it started like the paint started coming off, chipping off. It was like faded paint from the sun, whatever the case is. There was no care in the world of it, and it looked like absolutely dog crap. And then on top of that, you get a $1,800 car that's depreciated with time, and you don't get a real nice car look. It doesn't look real nice, and it looks like crap, and people treat it like crap, and so therefore it becomes crap. It doesn't matter how much your stuff costs. It matters how you carry yourself, how you present yourself. And you can still get that social standing in a sense by doing so. And you don't need to buy stupid stuff to be part of a group. And not to mention, guys, we are so past the tribal world that we once lived in. Sure, there are still groups. Sure, there are still, posses of people that run together or whatever the case is. But you don't need them to survive like you once did. It's changed. The game has changed, but we've still kept installed in our monkey brains that is telling us that we need to be accepted by that big group or by those people. And I think the solve for this is to turn off your social media or filter your social media. I think filtering your social media, not to see the best of everybody all the time, and then to think that you have to one-up them, is your best way to do things. I think reading books in history books in particular of how groups work together and how groups came together and things of that nature, I think is really a good solve for this. And I think deep diving into psychology is the next piece of the puzzle. And so not enough people go into the psychology components of money, but also themselves when it comes to understanding themselves on a subconscious level. And why my students get good results, the ones they do, is because when they come in, they meet with my behavioral psychologist, like I said, Heather, and she will deep dive into your subconscious within minutes and uncover things you never even knew. But when you become more aware of your psychology, you start to do things differently. And I think that is the solve for understanding the acceptance of good social standing. When you apply all these, and when you think back to these guys, avoiding pain, survival, emotions, groupthink, good social standing, all of these things are normal things. All of these things are human nature. All these things are going to continue to happen at some sort of level. But we need to start to become more aware when it comes to wealth building, because the difference is going to be how we treat ourselves and how we think about things, and the paradigm shifts that we have are going to change our lives in a big, big way. But we have to start thinking differently and applying all the things I talked about today, the solves for these, in order to get the results that we want to get with our finances. Again, if you guys want to work on my team, show notes below, apply to work on my team, talk with my teammates, and we'll put you in a good financial situation and get you on the right path, the right way, the long-term way, the foundational way, the fundamental way. As a CPA, that's how you're going to do it. That's how you're going to overcome this stuff. And the more aware you become of these podcasts and other information I put out, the better off you're going to be for you and your family for years to come. So with that being said, guys, I will talk to everybody next week.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brennan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.